We are recorded. So what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to change, now that we are right at 11 o'clock Central Time, I'm going to change what the room looks like here. You're going to see it kind of shift. And before I turn it over to Larry, I wanted to show you first a couple things. And let me make sure we're back to our original slide. There we go. First off, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a Q&A pod. That's what it's called. If you have any questions for Larry throughout, I will be monitoring that Q&A pod, and I'll be jotting down your questions, and we'll have some time at the end for that Q&A, and so I'll be asking your questions on your behalf. So please type them in there. I will be watching. Also, if you have any tech issues, that's where you type it in as well. And also, you'll be seeing parts of our Infamy website today, in addition to a presentation and some great oral histories from our collection. So, without further ado, and to make sure we stay on time, I want to introduce served in the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division as an infantryman. He joined the museum here in 2008 as a curator. Larry specializes in infantry weapons, uniforms, and the equipment of World War II. Since joining the museum, he's obviously our curators are so busy here. He has curated exhibits on the Battle of Midway, the Eastern Front, and the air war in Europe. He's also led multiple tours to Europe, so if any of you have done those, you might recognize him from that. And also many tours through the museum, and especially our vault, specializing in looking at our artifacts and our armament collection and providing an in-depth perspective of what soldiers carried and how it affected the outcomes on the battlefield. So Larry, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for sharing a little bit about this topic.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Chrissy. I guess everybody's pretty well aware that on December 7th, Pearl Harbor was attacked. But what I find fascinating is the fact that Pearl Harbor is just one tiny component of this massive coordinated attack over an area of about 25 million square miles. Now, the Pearl Harbor attack, which was the Japanese' easternmost military operation on December 7th, is contrasted with their easternmost operation, which is the landing of troops on the Malayan Peninsula. That's a distance of about 7,000 miles. And then the northernmost operation conducted on the 7th is in Shanghai, and the southernmost being Singapore, which is about 4,000 miles apart. So it's a massive area that the Japanese are conducting military operations. And the logistics, the timing, it's fascinating to me in an age before global positioning systems or satellites, computers. I mean, it's amazing. So over the course of this presentation, we're going to be looking at this map quite a bit. And I'm going to give you almost an hour-by-hour breakdown of major operations that occurred on the 7th. And also, I'm going to refer back to our Infamy website, which the Infamy exhibit on that microsite is from the 70th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And we have some oral histories from men who actually saw these events unfold firsthand. And I'll talk about some of our artifacts we have in our collection as well. Now, on this map here,
let's see where to go. Say, where'd the pointer go? So we're trying to get this point. Let me see here. It might be behind us. Sorry, folks. I just want to make sure that you can see. Sometimes Adobe Connect doesn't want to cooperate, and the pointer does not want to show up. Come on now. All right. Well, I don't know what is going on here. Sorry, please bear with us as we're trying to get a pointer so you can see what we're talking about. Let's see if we refresh these slides. Oh, it's at Shanghai, someone's telling me, but I don't see
it's Shanghai.
The green pointer looks like does not want to show up on our end here, so Do you mind continuing on without the pointer? You
Sure.
think you can do it?
I think I can
People
do it.
can look at the map very closely. This is an extra
so
challenge.
you'll have to pay
So,
extra close attention
yes.
now. And these Japanese operations happened on either side of the international date line. So east of that, events are occurring on the 8th. West, wait, is that correct? I'm confused now. Okay. So events occur on both the 7th and the 8th, depending on what part of the world you're in. But for simplicity's sake, all these times are going to be Hawaiian time. Okay? So the first event that happens actually doesn't even happen on the 7th. It happens on the afternoon of the 6th, when an Australian pilot spots a Japanese task force in the Gulf of Siam. Now, the Gulf of Siam would be way to the right in Thailand and Malaya, right in that area. So the Australian aviator, he's shot down and killed, but that's pretty much the opening shot of the Pacific War for the Allies, and this pilot is supposedly the first Allied soldier killed in the opening of the Pacific War. Other than the Chinese, who had been fighting for many years before that. So on the morning of the 7th, at 6:45 in the morning, 7,000 miles away in Hawaii, the USS Ward sinks a Japanese midget submarine near the entrance of Pearl Harbor. At 06:50, 5 minutes later, Japanese forces invade the Malayan Peninsula, which is right near the Gulf of Siam. Oh, there it is.
Oh, did it just appear?
Is that?
Let's see. Let me see if I can get... Oh, here. See, it's appearing on my screen now all of a sudden, which is strange.
Oh, there it is.
Here. Oh, there we
Okay.
go. Hey! So.
Okay. So Japanese forces land on the Malayan Peninsula.
That should make it easier for everybody.
Yeah. Then at 7:30 in the morning, way over here on 1,000 miles northeast of the Hawaiian Islands, a Japanese submarine sinks the U.S. merchant ship Cynthia Olsen. Now, all 31 crew members survive the attack, but they take to their lifeboats and they all die at sea. At 7:55, back in Hawaii, the first attack wave begins its attack on Pearl Harbor, Wheeler Airfield, and the attack on the island itself. Now, 30 minutes later, way over here in the Gulf of Siam, this is probably the task force that the Australian pilot spotted. But this Japanese force invades Thailand. And Thailand falls rather quickly for the Japanese. They surrender just a few hours later. Also at 8:30, way back here on Oahu, the first attack wave of Japanese aircraft retires. At 0900, the second wave hits Pearl Harbor. 9:30, way over here in Shanghai, the international settlement is attacked by Japanese forces. Also, the U.S. river gunboat USS Wake is captured by Japanese forces. This is the only U.S. ship to be captured by enemy forces during World War II. 15 minutes later, the attack on Oahu is over. Now, 10:30 in the morning. Japanese aircraft attack Singapore down here, south, at the very southern tip of the Malayan Peninsula. Now the Japanese land in Malaya, and they drive British Commonwealth forces down the peninsula here. And by February 1st, all the British forces have retreated to Singapore. On February 8th, Japanese forces invade Singapore itself. And on the 15th, the British forces surrender, 15th of February. General Percival, the commander of the garrison there in Singapore, surrenders about 80,000 British and Commonwealth troops to an inferior force, or numerically inferior force, of 36,000 Japanese troops. This is a crushing defeat, and it shouldn't have happened. No way a numerically inferior force should be able to defeat that many troops. It turns out to be the worst British disaster in military history. Now at 11:57, we are with the Japanese as they attack Guam. Now, I'm going to refer to our microsite here.
Yeah, let me bring it up for you. So you guys, your screen will change. We're going to be sharing our screen. I'm going to bring up a new window so that we can check out the site that Larry was referencing. All right. So here it is. So you folks should now see an exhibit website pop up on your screen, and Larry's going to guide us through.
So Guam is really just, there's just a handful of U.S. military personnel there. Ray Church here, a private first class in the Marine Corps, I think he's among about a dozen Marines that are serving as more or less embassy guard duty. So I'll let you listen to his oral history.
Yeah, we're actually gonna do it actually on another. Sometimes Adobe Connect is complicated, as you can see. Sometimes it doesn't want to share its pointer. Sometimes it does, and we also have to load up our oral histories in here in a different way so you guys can see and hear them. All right, so here is Ray Church.
We didn't know what war was all about. It was a brand new thing for all of us. One morning I heard this noise outside the apartment, and people running about back and forth, and one of the fellows come and opened the door there, one of the native people, and they said the Japanese bombed Sume, which is about 13 miles away. We hadn't been bombed yet. We were about 15 miles from Sume. And so then the natives began running down the street screaming, they're dumping the bombs, so they came over and began bombing Ganga. The governor received a telegram, the Japanese commander, and said, surrender the island. Surrender the island. You're covered, you're surrounded by ships, and and we submit that you surrender. My governor, which was a military governor, naturally, he said, no, we're not going to surrender. We're not going to surrender the island without a thing out of a struggle. So they wired back to the Japanese that we're not going to surrender. And the Japanese decided they're going to land on a Ganga, which they knew they were going to do it because they captured the island. If they captured this island, captured this governor's office, then the island would fall. So they landed on Wednesday morning, about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, and they come in the big force, to us, against us. So the Japanese, they came in with They came with 5,000 troops. There were 8 Marines and I think about 30 Guam militia. Now, those fellows hadn't even shot a rifle before, you know, most of these poor little militia guys. But they were brave. They were right there. And so we stationed them around the governor's palace there, and we set up a little perimeter, which is called now the Last Stand. The governor's aide came running down the stairway, and he had a sheet tied on a broom handle. He's waving his sheet back and forth, and running down towards where the Japanese main force were. We thought we'd never see him again because it looked like it was really heavy down there. So, but he went down there and he met the Japanese commander, and told us to, you know, throw our stuff away. I mean, come out with our hands up. So we didn't know what to expect. Hard to believe, but that 8 Marines held the Japanese off with the militia, which again were not very efficient, but we held them off, the whole force off, for maybe 35, 40 minutes. And and then we had to stop because we had no more ammunition. So anyway, the Japanese came in, and they went around all where we were, and I was laying behind his hedge there, fighting under a hedge, and the Japanese came up to me and he knocked the helmet off his bayonet, and I was taken prisoner.
Okay, now we're back live.
So Guam falls very, very quickly. Not a lot of resources there to defend it. At 12 o'clock, 3 minutes after the attack began on Guam, if we go to this little island here, north of the Philippines, very small island called Bataan Island. Now, on this island was an airstrip that the Japanese needed to take to support their operation on Luzon here. Now, of course, they didn't realize they were going to make such significant gains on Luzon so quickly. So the idea was to capture this airfield and repurpose it for air support for their ground operations on Luzon. Now, about 500 troops of the Special Naval Landing Force from the Imperial Japanese Navy landed here, and they took the airstrip there with no resistance. But that's at noon. I mean, you would think that they would have got some warning here at Clark Field that this attack's underway. But that didn't happen. At 1:30, an hour and a half later, the Japanese invade Hong Kong. And British Commonwealth forces surrendered 10,000 troops to a Japanese force of 52,000 on Christmas Day. So that's kind of an unwinnable fight. I don't blame the guys for surrendering there. At 2:28, Japanese forces begin an aerial bombardment of Wake Island. Okay. Now, Wake Island is probably the most significant action as far as the Allies are concerned on the 7th. The Marines and even the civilian contractors at Wake, the naval personnel, they all gave the best account of themselves. Wake is defended at this time by the 1st Marine Defense Battalion, which is about 450 Marines. Now they're quite heavily armed. Let's see. Oops.
There we go.
Here's Wake Island here. So Wake is a tiny atoll that's made up of 3 tiny islands: Peel Island, Wilkes Island, and Wake itself. Now, Pan American Airways established a refueling base for its Trans-Pacific Clipper flights here. So it was a stopover for the Clipper, and there was a luxury hotel here. To travel that way was very, very expensive. Only the very, very wealthy could do it. So in the 30s, this was being built up by Pan American Airways. Then around January of 41, the United States declared that we need to beef up the defenses on Wake Island. So that's when the military base is starting to be constructed. And there's about 1,000 civilian contractors here on the 7th. So the Marines at Wake, they're actually quite heavily armed. They have 6 5-inch 51s, which are coastal defense batteries. Now, during the 20s, this was the secondary armament on all the battleships. Like all the battleships at Pearl Harbor would have had these at one time in their history. Then they were refitted in the 20s. U.S. Navy went from a coal-fired Navy to an oil boiler Navy. So all these guns are replaced, and they're replaced with dual-purpose guns, which could engage both an aerial target or a surface target. So these 5-inch 51s here, they were only good for surface targets. So military not wasting anything. All these guns are removed from all the battleships, and each Marine Defense Battalion are issued 6 of these. Now the story goes that the guns on Wake were from the battleship Texas initially. But this gun, quite effective. This can hurl a 50-pound projectile at a muzzle velocity of about 3,000 feet per second for 9 miles. The weapon is purpose-built to combat destroyers. So this was an excellent weapon that the Marines had. Now, granted, they only had 6, and they had 20 miles of coastline to defend. Now, they had 12 anti-aircraft batteries. Now, these are 3-inch 50s. These are all naval guns. These were quite effective in the Marines on Wake Island. They damaged about 20 aircraft, shot down at least a dozen. And finally, the machine gun section for the Marine Defense Battalion consisted of 24 1917 30 caliber water-cooled machine guns. Now these are 30 caliber. Now these are classified as heavy machine guns because they're water-cooled. Now a water-cooled machine gun, the big benefit over that, as opposed to an air-cooled weapon, is you can, as long as there's water in this jacket right here, you can fire this weapon all day long. You don't have to fire it in bursts like an air-cooled weapon. There's no fear of burning out the barrel in it. So this is a high volume of fire this weapon can put down range. So there's 24 of these on the island. And then this is a still from the 1943 movie Wake Island. Now, the weapon you see here is a 50 caliber water-cooled machine gun. Now, this is the big brother of the 30 caliber there. Now, because it's water-cooled, you keep water in this jacket, you got nothing to worry about. You can shoot it all day long. Now, there's 24 of those on the island as well. Okay. So the first attack that Wake experiences are from these G3M Bombers. Allied code name for these was Nell. These operated out of the Marshalls. Now Wake Island lacked radar. And in addition to the ground forces there were 12 Wildcat fighters from VMF 211. Now, that morning was overcast at Wake. They had 4 of their Wildcats up in the air, but they never did see the bombers coming in. And so 8 of the aircraft on the ground were destroyed by this initial bombing raid. So that hamstringed the defenders at Wake right from the outset. Now it's not until the 11th, after the Marines and occupants of Wake Island have endured daily bombing raids, that a Japanese invasion fleet appears. So the commander of the Marines on Wake, a Major Devereaux, he instructs all his coastal batteries to not fire until the Japanese invasion force is well within range. Devereaux feared that if the Japanese thought that the island's defenses were still intact after all those air raids, they would just stand off at a distance and just shell the island. So as this invasion force approaches, it's without a carrier. There's no air cover to cover this invasion force. So the Japanese, they just roll right up to the island and they close within 4,000 yards. And that's when the defense or the coastal batteries open up. And I will let you hear the oral history from PFC Jack Skaggs, who was on one of those gun crews.
All right, so we're going to bring up Jack Skaggs' oral history here. This is also from the Infamy website, so if you want to watch any of these oral histories again, they are available on there, and I will share that link at the end of the program. All right, here's Jack Skaggs.
We were on duty on the BC scope, just searching the ocean horizon, and it's getting almost dark. And one of us happened to just look back to our right, and we see 2 images of ships, and it looked like large ships to us. We reported immediately to our battery commander and the point Captain Platt, and he immediately called Major Devereaux. And Devereaux was supposed to have said, the British, the Australians, and the Americans don't have any warships in the area at all. So the only other thing, the best guess is that it's the Japanese, and we'll see them in the morning. So he passed the word to the artillery not to fire until he gives the order. The Japanese ships started attacking back and forth, coming into the island from the south. Finally, they just came in close to satisfied Devereaux that they were good targets. So he said, commence firing, and they were only about 4,000 yards. And everybody was in the show. I mean, every fire-range battery had a target or 2. The one that my battery sunk, they came down. They were coming from the south, but they didn't get very far. They never started firing a gun, and we go boom, boom like that, 2 salvos, and that destroyer headed to the bottom. The whole back half of the ship blew off. It had to hit either a magazine where they kept their ammunition, or it could have hit torpedoes or something, depth charges, anything that, because it was a regular destroyer, a great big ship. But it was 2 good lucky shots that sent her down. That morning, we looked out and saw 43 ships on the horizon. We counted 43 battleships and cruisers and carriers, and so we didn't. It ran through my mind. We didn't have a whole lot of an opportunity to win the battle or to get off that island. They started landing around 12 or 1 o'clock morning of the 23rd of December. I never thought about what may or may not come with being captured. When Major Devereaux came over to he was met by Captain Platt. He said, "Major, what are you doing with that white flag up there?" Of course, the Japanese soldiers all around him, and he's up in the back end of one of our dump trucks. And he said, "Platt, the island surrendered." Said, "Send someone down through there. There'll be no more fighting. The island has surrendered."
So that initial invasion on December 11th was turned around by the coastal gun batteries on Wake Island. The Japanese were very surprised. So they withdrew. The Japanese had brought with them a detachment of a special naval landing force of about 450 troops. But once they saw the island was still, the defenses were still quite intact, they turned and they left. So this is the only victory on the 7th for the Allied forces in the Pacific, and it doesn't take long before these guys on Wake Island are like literally national heroes. And a rescue effort is actually planned where task force centering around the USS Saratoga was going to bring the 4th Marine Defense Battalion there to bolster the island, along with aircraft, radar, and it turned into a race between the Japanese fleet returning to take it and the U.S. Task Force 11, I believe it was, on their way to relieve them and at least evacuate the civilians there and bolster the defenses there. But the Japanese actually got there first on the 23rd. And the Japanese came back with a much better equipped force on the 23rd. In fact, 2 carriers that from Kido Butai, the mobile striking force that hit Pearl Harbor, the Hiryu and the Soryu, I believe, were detached, and they were there to provide air cover for the invasion. And something else pretty significant happened that day. With their 2 Wildcat fighters left, one of the aviators, Marine aviators, was able to shoot down the Japanese bombardier who was credited with putting the fatal bomb into the Arizona. So that air crew was killed during that engagement. But when the Japanese forces finally do make a landing on Wake Island, they pay heavily for it. As I said earlier, the island was machine gun heavy. I mean, they mowed these guys down. I believe about 1,000 Japanese troops were killed during this operation. Between the 11th and the 23rd. But again, the island falls, and it's because Devereaux in his command bunker, the lines are cut to all his batteries due to the shelling and the fighting on the island. And he peeks his head out of the bunker. He sees that there's all these Japanese flags around the island. He assumes that all the positions are knocked out or captured. So he surrenders when it's the opinion of most of the Marines that fought there. They could have held out for a little longer, and they could have put bloodied Japanese nose a little worse than they did. But that's what happens on Wake Island. And eventually, all the prisoners there are shipped off to POW camps in Japan and China. Um, the Japanese keep about 98 of those civilian contractors there to bolster the defenses for them on Wake Island. The Japanese assume that the United States Navy will come back and try and take it. However, our strategy was to bypass Wake Island, and we literally let it wither on the vine. So in 1943, Japanese troops are starving. We're interdicting that place. They can't get anything in there, and Wake Island almost turns into like a live fire range for carrier task forces headed out to the Pacific. This is where a lot of naval aviators get their first combat experience. They fly over. It's literally like shooting a fish in a barrel. They fly over there, they bomb it, and they get a little combat experience. But the Japanese who are there, knowing they can't feed these POWs anymore and fearing an invasion any day, they execute all 98 of those POWs there, which they largely were. I think they were all civilians. But the Japanese situation there is so desperate that they hunt to extinction Wake Island's only indigenous bird, the Wake Island rail. They eat it to extinction. But the island, it isn't formally given back to us. It doesn't surrender until September of '45. So that's the story at Wake. Now, back to our timeline.
We want to go back to that.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the map here.
Gotta go a few more, I think. Yeah.
All right, here we are. All right. So, at 6 p.m. Hawaiian time, where's our pointer? All right. Here at Clark Field, Japanese bombers operating from Formosa attack Clark Field in the Philippines and decimate the Far East Air Force. Now that's a big mystery as to why 9 hours after hostilities begin, that all our B-17s are on the ground at Clark Field and are decimated. Now, over the course of the next few weeks, Japanese landings occur along Luzon, at least a dozen, and they, in pretty short order, drive U.S. forces back. And I want to say it's around Christmas Day. U.S. forces have declared Manila an open city. The Japanese are just running through the Philippines like mad. Now, we do have a oral history from Glenn Fraser, who was a private at the time, or I'm sorry, a sergeant at the time, and he shares his experience.
On the 19th and 20th, the ships arrived in Lingayen Bay, so we were being invaded. But now we're standing out there about 15 or 20 hours, and we looked at each other and we said, you know, we're at war. And that was really touched me. And I had problems coming from a Christian family of even thinking about killing anybody. And I thought, boy, this is going to be tough, because even though we're ordnance, we probably would be faced with that. And when we were told that there was close to 100,000, they estimated 100,000 troops Japanese troops, that it would be, we would have a rough time. I was carrying a BAR and was trying to find some of my men to get them and round them up and so forth and take them, get them out of there. And a Jap jumped out of the bushes and lunged at me with his bayonet. His bayonet caught where the strap, the shoulder strap of the BAR and the latch to the stock. It hit that little clip, and with the force that he had, pulled it out of my hand. And he's right by the side of me. So I grabbed him and pulled him to me, and I took my hunting knife and I stuck it in him and stuck it all the way through him and a little bit into me. And in other words, and I didn't know, and it went evidently right below his rib cage, but anyway, and that was a hunting knife with a pretty good sized blade. And so I thought, my best thought is I don't know whether I killed him or not, so I'll just drag him over here to the bluff and throw him off the bluff. And the way I threw him off, it was about 500 foot, so I drug him over and threw him off that bluff. We would hear Tokyo Rose telling us no reinforcements were on the way. And we would hear the Voice of America station at Corregidor telling us that there were reinforcements coming. We then, with a few men that we had left that were able to fight and all, and the 31st Infantry, we took that time to sort of get ourselves together and plan what we was going to do. So we held them another 2 months. We had heard some trucks and tanks, and as we got down to the road, we would have to go down to Marvelous airstrip where we were supposed to report to. The tank came on up behind us, and behind that tank was some more soldiers with some other prisoners, and we marched down, and this was getting late in the afternoon, to the Marvelous runway, where they had them all lined up there, and we lined up and spaced out like hand to hand. We stood there, and they looked at everything we had, and they took whatever they wanted, took watches, and they took all kinds of things. And they took our canteens and poured the water out and gave us the canteen back. And then we saw some guys that had some things were Japanese, and they just took them and pulled them out back, and you could hear them shooting them out back. And so we started a march, and it was late in the afternoon, sort of late. It wasn't sundown yet, it was getting late. And we marched that night, and the next morning, it got on over, and we were just coming out of the mountains, and the picture that was taken by the Japanese was taken that morning. We were devastated. And here we realized that we had been captured, and we realized that these people were beating and killing people. Everything that we get now, we've got to be strong to sustain life. And as we walked down that hill, it was sad times for us. And we looked over at our flagpole, where our American flag was flying, had been all the time when we go out there. And there was a Japanese flag flying. And I'm telling you, that was sinking time, hard times for me. I thought about home. I thought about everything and the possibility that could happen to me. Not knowing where we were going, the uncertainty and everything. It was really tough.
So the Japanese forces, once they start landing on Luzon, they are really surprised about how quickly they're making gains in the Philippines. Now, all this, everything, this whole entire operation, this is intended to give them a free hand in the Far East so they can grab the natural resources. So this is the big prize for the Japanese right here, Java. This is where the oil fields are. Now, it can be argued that the Japanese launched this entire attack because the United States declared the oil embargo on them, and I think that's probably a good point. However, the Japanese assumed they couldn't move on the Dutch East Indies down here without the United States intervening here from the Philippines, and the British intervening here from their colonies in Singapore. So the idea this is the big prize for the Japanese right here, Java. So because of the gains made in the Philippines, our forces are retreating so quickly, they divert a lot of some of their best divisions from the Philippines to invade Java, which occurs in early February of 42. Now that's the reason why we're able to hold out so long in the Philippines. A lot of those forces, some of the best troops were diverted, and that's why the corregidor didn't fall until May. But I think on our microsite we have.
Yeah, you want me to share that again?
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
We have the General Wainwright's surrender radio broadcast. That was obviously a Japanese.
We need to go back to Philippines, right?
Philippines,
Yeah.
yes. It was a huge victory for the Japanese, so they use it as.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Here we are. This is recorded by the Japanese or broadcast by the Japanese.
Let's see if it'll play. It may or may not share audio. We'll see, but you guys can watch later if it doesn't.
Surrender. It became apparent that the garrison on those forces would be eventually destroyed by aerial and artillery bombardment and by infantry supported by tanks which have overwhelmed corregidor. After leaving General Rommel with no agreement between us, I decided to accept, in the name of humanity, his proposal. You will therefore be guided accordingly, and will, I think will, surrender all troops under your command to the proper Japanese officers. This decision on my part, and I realize, was forced upon me by means entirely beyond my control.
So as you can see, the events of December 7th are, the scope of the Japanese military operations conducted in that 24-hour period is just massive and mind-boggling. Now, granted, the Japanese did all that without a declaration of war, but however, the operations that they conducted, the U.S. Navy and the Marine Corps, the Army, we wouldn't reach a level of that sophistication until late 44, early 45. I find that quite interesting, and I hope you did too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Larry. Do you mind taking a couple questions while
Not at all. No.
we've got some time? And this is the time, folks, if you haven't submitted those questions into that Q&A area, that you're most welcome to, and I'll be looking out for them. Bill is wondering, did the Allied forces, did they discover this Japanese buildup? Did they have any idea that the Japanese were building up to do what you just covered,
Well, in the Philippines, prior, maybe a week or two before the attack, I believe a large formation of Japanese bombers came within, a few miles of Lingayen Gulf, I believe, and it was thought that they were practicing their bombing runs, but that intelligence went to waste.
Yeah. Okay, this is a me question. So, because everything, especially about Wake Island, I thought was really interesting that you shared. So you were saying that it was kind of a race between the Japanese and the United States to either try to capture Wake again or rescue. How far behind was that U.S. rescue mission? Do you know?
Well, the U.S. task force, they stopped for 24 hours to refuel at sea. They were about 500 miles away. Now, by the time the Japanese started attacking the island, the naval commander there, Commander Cunningham, he sent a message. I think the message was "Situation in doubt, enemy on the island." So right when Admiral Pye, who was Admiral Kimmel's replacement because he was sacked, he was the scapegoat for Pearl Harbor. Right when he heard that, Admiral Pye was never really keen on the idea of risking 2 carriers. There was the Lexington was also part of that rescue operation, but that task force was designed to be a diversion, and they were headed towards the Marshall Islands. So when Admiral Pye heard that dispatch from Wake, he's like, "Well, no way. There's 2 Japanese carriers in the area on top of that? No." So it's probably a smart play. I mean, they probably would have sunk both those carriers, I think.
And then, do you have any sense what does Wake look like today? I mean, it's so remote, right?
Yeah.
It's an atoll. I mean,
Wake Island today is there is a contingent of Air Force personnel there, and I mean it's like a dozen maybe. But I think in the last few years the island lost its population of feral cats. So one of the things I hear about Wake Island is that it's just covered in rats. There's about 2.5 million rats on that island.
I have heard that. That's crazy.
which works out to about 1 million rats per square mile there.
That's pretty awful. And maybe with that note, since it looks like our group's being a little shy and quiet, I thought, why don't we transfer to our last room area here, and if there's any last, we can sneak them in at the end. But I wanted to share with you guys a few other resources to check out. Let me pause it here for a second. Larry referenced quite often our Infamy website, which you just saw on screen there just a second ago. But it's infamydecember1941.org. You can listen to all the oral histories that we just did over again, and you can see those interactive maps, which I just showed you one of those at the end there of Wake Island. But you can go through kind of the same timeline that Larry did, like, what was happening in those particular places, at least, at certain times, at certain days. And so that's a really neat resource on there. And of course, there's images of artifacts as well. Let's see, what else do I got for you guys? Of course, you can visit the museum's online store. There's a lot of merchandise commemorating the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. There's a link there. You'll see it again. I'll put the slideshow on repeat here in a second. But most importantly, we've had 4 hours of content, and we're like almost to I feel like an entire class about Pearl Harbor and the other invasions on December 7th. They will be all available once I'm done with the recording with this one, and I'll throw it on YouTube for you folks. Everything will be available on pearl75.org/online learning. So if you've missed any of these parts of these series, including yesterday's commemoration ceremony in our U.S. Freedom Pavilion, they will all be there for you here shortly. So I will email to all registrants this link again so that you have it. You can also see some of those links are on the left-hand side where it says web links, and so you can access them there as well. So I guess without further ado, I think we're good to go, everyone. We really appreciate you spending the time with us today. Have a great remainder of your morning and have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.